Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking some time out of surely what must be a busy day to visit about a topic that we are super passionate about. We believe this will be a time very well spent. The topic we'll be covering today is unlocking potential, navigating challenges, and securing futures. This is the four-step blueprint for families that have a special needs loved one to be able to do the planning to secure their future. By way of disclaimer, we want to share that Caring Tide respects, in fact, Jenny, do you want to share your screen? Caring Tide respects every individual's right to express who they are in one-on-one discussions. We will use person first or identity first language based on the person's preference. In group settings, we will use a mix of the two in hopes of having everyone feel like they are being included and respected. And so are you able to share your screen, Jenny? I'm actually not seeing is the presentation sharing?
Yes, Pete, do you see the disclaimer there?
I actually don't know.
Well, shoot, guys, hold on just a minute.
That's okay.
If
We
we
will
can
have it up in no time at all. The one positive is where I'm at is a beautiful day today. We've had snow and rain and everything in between. And so we will take any chance we can get the opportunity to enjoy some sunshine. There you go.
Are you seeing it now?
Okay, perfect. Awesome,
Okay.
awesome. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. And are you on the right screen? Is everyone seeing our resource directory?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
exactly right.
thanks.
So one exciting announcement is we want to share that for all of our attendees that stay through the end of the presentation, we will be able to provide you at no cost to you a free resource guide. This is a resource guide that is a national directory for all resources that are available for families that have a loved one that has a disability. So please allow me to be able to introduce myself. My name is Brady Murray, and I'm the founder of Caring Tide. I'm the father of 5 children that have a disability. Super, super involved in the nonprofit community, and I've been happily married to Andrea, the love of my life, for the last 22 years. I'm a chartered special needs consultant, also a certified financial planner, as well as the managing partner for the financial planning firm Capstone Partners. Please allow me to share with you a little bit about my journey as I entered into the disability community. And in fact, Jenny, there you go, perfect. So when Andrea and I were first married, we welcomed our beautiful daughter, Brinley, into our lives. She was awesome, and she is an 18-year-old graduating senior in 2 weeks from now, our first child to graduate. Shortly after we welcomed Brinley, we welcomed our first son, Nash, into our family. I was so excited. You go back one more slide, Jenny. I was so excited to be able to welcome Nash into my family because I am like a dad's dad. I love all things outdoors. I love baseball, and I could only envision the amazing things that I'd be doing with my son. It was about 10 minutes after Nash was born that the doctor came over to me, put his arm around me, and he said that, Brady, we believe Nash has Down syndrome. That was my introduction into this world. I was very emotional, as you can imagine. This was a very scary moment. And together with Andrea, we just hugged and we cried. And it took quite a long time to be able to just get through some of that initial grief that we experienced. Fast forward now 17 years later, and Nash is amazing. He is the light of our life, and he is just a superstar. I like to say he's the most eligible bachelor at American Fork High School right now. He's a sophomore at American Fork High School and is just thriving. He's somebody that is an inspiration for me, and he's a huge, huge inspiration for so many other individuals. Something about Nash is Nash loves school. Ever since he was just a little guy, he loves going to school. In fact, it's got to a point where truly it is a part of his identity. He is so disappointed on days when he doesn't get to go to school, and he's always the first one up in the mornings where he does have school. That led me to start thinking and to actually have a conversation with Andrea to where we asked ourselves a pretty tough question. And that question was, what happens when the school bus stops coming? What happens when Nash graduates from high school? And that caused us to start to really reflect on, are we truly prepared and are we going to be able to really help Nash, what I refer to as sing the song he's meant to sing? As I began exploring more, I learned things about guardianship that I had no idea about. I learned things about many, many other situations. So, perfect example, what happens when Nash turns 18? Is it considered an adult? What happens, and is still at the level of a 7-year-old? And so these are just some of the questions. These 4 questions up here are questions that I had in my mind. And then I had an extremely terrifying question come to my mind. And that is, what will happen when Nash, when we're not here to take care of Nash? Like, what's going to happen to our boy? I look at Nash, I come home from work today, or when I come home from work today, he'll come running down the hallway. He'll give me a great big hug and he'll say, Daddy, Daddy. And he's 17 years old. How many 17-year-olds do that? The reality is, Nash will probably do that when he's 25, 35, or even 55. And then there's going to be a day when Daddy doesn't come home. And how devastating will that be for my son, who truly is innocent and very dependent on us? So it was these questions that really stirred something within Andrea and I that we felt like we really needed to answer. We started to get answers for. We started to ask our friends and expand into our network of families that have children with disabilities, and we found they all had the same questions, the same terrifying questions. And that is the motivation for why we created Caring Tide. Right now, there are 42 million Americans that have a disability. 7 million of these individuals have a cognitive or an intellectual disability. These families need our help. I truly believe that this is the most underserved demographic that's out there in our country right now. And our vision is to be able to give all of these families a voice. Our vision at Caring Tide is to be able to give every family in our entire country entrusted with a loved one who has a disability the opportunity to get the planning they need and they deserve. And so it's my pleasure now to be able to introduce our director for Caring Tide, Jenny Dopp. Jenny is an individual whom I've known for a number of years and does amazing work for our community. Not only is she serving our community professionally as our director, but she's also a mom of a child that has a special need. And so, Jenny, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you, and Jenny will be able to share the remainder of our program.
Thank you, Brady. Thank you for that introduction. As Brady said, I am a mother of a child with a disability. I have Jackson. He's there in the gray sweater, and he has a chromosome duplication called 7q11.23 duplication. And he also is on the autism spectrum. And so it's been a journey for us. We're now 23 years into this, and I've had to figure out every step of the way because he didn't really fit into a certain disability family or a support system because his chromosome was so rare. He was the first one diagnosed in the state of Utah and also the 11th diagnosed in the world. So he's really been a pioneer, and we have been able to find our village by pulling different pieces of the disability community support into this nice little package of services that fits Jackson's needs. And so that's part of why I'm so attached to Caring Tide and why I believe in our mission is because we really want to say, okay, this is where you are today. We're meeting you where you're at, and we are going to help you find your way on this journey. It's kind of like when you walk into Disneyland. You just are so overwhelmed with all of the sights and the sounds and the smells. And there's so many different places you can go, and you get to pick and choose what is the best path for you in Disneyland. And that's what it's like with planning and looking ahead to the future. I want to show you this graph. This is what a typical family looks like when they're planning and thinking about the future. So I get married, I start having my family, we start thinking about, okay, our kids are going to graduate from high school. What do we need to do to get them on their path when they graduate from high school? Well, let's look ahead. Are we putting money away for our 401k so that we can retire someday? And that's our retirement plan. And then we need to prepare for when we as parents pass away. That's what a typical family's planning situation looks like. Well, when my planning situation started with Jackson, he was 5 months in utero, and I found out he had some brain structure anomalies. So, right at birth, we were looking to see, okay, what do we need to put in place? We know there's going to be some developmental delay. So, our journey started with early intervention. And then I strapped my little 3-year-old onto the special ed school bus, which was just, I mean, parents know who've done this. It's the hardest thing to just release your 3-year-old into the world of special education. And then when we were in the hospital, I thought, okay, when I had him when he was born, what is junior high going to look like for this child? Junior high is tough for every single person. What is junior high going to look like for my son with a disability? And then I go to my last IEP meeting when he's a senior, thinking that we have this path forward for post high, and he's accidentally going to graduate because the school credits weren't calculated correctly. And so we had to get into a big thing with the school district and making sure I advocated for his needs for a post high program until he was 22. Now we're looking at things like Social Security and Medicaid because it's no longer dependent upon my income. I'm looking at, and this started when he was 14, but things that we could do to transition him to adulthood, prepare him for adulthood. What about employment? What about pre-ETS or pre-employment transition services? What about maturation? How to understand his body? What about social, emotional connections? That's really hard for a person with autism sometimes to make those connections. And then, of course, what happens when I'm not here? Do I have all of the pieces in place with guardianship? Or maybe guardianship isn't the right choice for your family. Maybe you're looking at power of attorney. Maybe you're looking at limited guardianship. Maybe you're looking at supported decision making. Nobody's situation is the same. And so that's what the mission of Caring Tide is to meet you where you are, and we'll help you identify all of these different choices. We look at your situation in your community. Caring Tide serves the entire nation. So I help a mom in Georgia. I help a mom in Pennsylvania. We've helped moms in California. We look at all of the different resources available in your state, in your community, and help you connect with those. And a lot of us are really savvy parents, right? We've been at this for a while. And so we know all the things, but sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So perhaps there's a way for Caring Tide to connect you to additional resources that you might not be aware of in your community. So keep this in mind as we have this conversation today of all of these different stages. Not only do I need to prepare for when Jackson passes away to make sure I have resources to cover that for him, but also so that my other children who will potentially be Jackson's caregivers are left with a blueprint that they're not trying to figure out all of these different pieces that I've figured out for 23 years, and that I can leave that for them. We want to first start with an assessment tool. When you work with Caring Tide, I go through and do an assessment, and we say, okay, what do you already have in place? Is the Medicaid waiver available in your state? Is that something you qualify for? Does your child have an intellectual disability? What type of support is needed? What are the natural supports that are available to your loved one? Are there neighbors? Is there a church community? Is there a social club? Are they involved with a youth program? What's available to your loved one? So that's the very first thing we do. We not only assess what you already have in place as far as financial planning and estate planning, but also these resources. And that's what sets Caring Tide apart from other professional service companies, is that we really take this holistic approach to really evaluate every aspect of life. Because if behavior is controlling every moment of your day, or you have a child that's an eloper, somebody who runs, and you have to have eyes on them 24/7, you really don't have a lot of emotional or physical bandwidth to really dig into the nitty-gritty of financial planning or estate planning or Social Security or Medicaid waivers. It's just, you're just doing your best every day and white knuckling it. So we really try to do that heavy lifting and put some of those pieces in place for you. And we also look at some significant planning questions. Everybody thinks, okay, what's going to happen to my child? But we need to look a little bit deeper. Where are we today in this moment? What are we facing right now? Where do we want to go? What's our dream? And here's the other key. What are the dreams of Jackson? What do we need to do to help Jackson achieve the life he wants for himself? It's called self-determination, also person-centered planning. How can we help Jackson evaluate every stage of his life? We use tools like charting the life course or community mapping and self-determination tools to really get their voice involved. And also, who are the potential caregivers? So how will we get there? If Lexi, his older sister, is going to be his caregiver, she's 26, she lives about 5 hours from us, what will that look like? Is she the best choice? What about the situation with her own family? Does she have the bandwidth to be Jackson's caregiver? What about if something happens to her? What about if she's separated from her partner and we needed to make sure that she had the emotional bandwidth for her? Is there another person, maybe an aunt or an uncle, who's in a better situation to look at the holistic view of Jackson's life? So we help you answer all of these planning questions. We also perform an audit. Now, an audit is kind of a little bit of a scary word, but we look at your situation as far as finances. Are you working right now? Do you have maybe a life insurance policy with your employer? Okay, what happens when you quit that job and you go to another company and maybe they don't offer that same benefit? And now your health situation has changed, and maybe now it's going to be harder for you to qualify for a life insurance policy. Maybe you'll have to pay a higher rate. Do you already have a private life insurance policy in place? Do you have something outside of work that you can tap into? Have you been able to leverage the funding of the cash accrual in your policies to maybe tap into that for retirement? Is that an option? Or are you on more of a restricted product that's going to help, that's going to make it so that you can't tap into those resources? Have you already set up an ABLE account for your loved one? Have you already tapped into Social Security now that they're 18? If your income allowed them to tap into Social Security, or maybe there was a survivor benefit, is that something that's part of your plan? So we look at all of the different pieces so that we can have a true view of what's going on in your life and then help you answer those hard questions. So these are the three pieces that go into planning. It's not just one thing. It's not, oh, my older sister is going to do it. We're going to be fine. There's so many more pieces that go into play. So there's the legal piece. Are the courts going to recognize that person? Has guardianship been set up? Is power of attorney already set up? Is there an advanced healthcare directive? Have you identified that you only need guardianship over the financial or over the health? What about those community resources? Do you already know what pieces your loved one can tap into to make sure that they have the quality of life that they need? What about the financial planning piece? Is something missing? What about a policy for your loved one to cover that funeral benefit? What are the pieces that you have and what pieces still need to be put into place? So my siblings are great planners, and this is what life looks like for them. It's just your traditional planning model. You know, you have those emergency reserves. You want the first to get a month supply and a 3-month supply and a 6-month supply of your income. And then you'll start to accumulate and compound interest, and then your retirement planning. This is what it looks like for them, right? Well, what is different for my family than my siblings? We have to think about total life care planning. We need to think about proper gifting and inheritance management. Jackson has some grandparents with a little piece of property up in Idaho. And when they sell that piece, it's going to go into their trust, but it's going to be divided between the family members. It's possible a piece of that would go to Jackson. Well, what would happen if they just think they're being so great and they left their grandson Jackson this property? Well, that would actually be detrimental and devastating to Jackson because it would make him ineligible for things like SSI and Medicaid. Jackson's not allowed to have any more than $2,000 in his name or he'll become ineligible for those benefits. So we have to talk to our family about inheritance and gifting. We also need to think about what it's going to take to get Jackson through his life and also my husband and I through the rest of our life. So the lifetime support, do we have a trust established? And not only a trust, but is there a special needs component to the trust so that those funds are protected specifically for Jackson so it doesn't make him ineligible for services? What about a transition plan? What if I was hit by a bus tomorrow? Are the pieces in place? Is Jackson connected with vocational rehabilitation? Does he have a job coach? Even somebody who knows how to make toast, that's an employable skill. I've worked with one mom. She had a 25-year-old daughter with Down syndrome. Her daughter was tapped into the state's Medicaid waiver system and also Social Security. But the daughter was bored and the mom was really frustrated. And so what else could she do? She didn't want to allow her daughter to work because she didn't want to jeopardize those benefits. So we showed her how there's a scale that her daughter could still go out into the community, could still have those inclusion experiences, still be able to work and not jeopardize those benefits. We just have to be very strategic on how we do that. And then also cash reserves. How are we going to leave enough cash for Lexi to be able to care for Jackson? How are we going to do that? So many families are on a really fixed income, limited budget. Other families have a plethora of assets. And so everybody's situation is different. But what Caring Tide does is, again, we meet you where you are. We look to see what's happening in your situation, and then we find a path forward. For every single person, there's a next step forward, a next right step, and we help you see that. Sometimes, because we're white knuckling it, it's really hard to see. What about things like a letter of intent or a mission statement, guardianship, any of that special needs planning? It's not that I can just, I mean, I can pass away tomorrow and just say, figure it out, and I'm wishing you all well. But wouldn't it be better if I had this beautiful portfolio for Lexi that said, this is Jackson's psychologist, this is the medication he's on, this is the dosage, this is his natural support network. If you can't pick him up from McDonald's at work, then call this neighbor. She's available these days. It's like this total plan of Jackson. It's this letter of intent, what we want for him, what our wishes are. I want him to be able to live in an apartment by himself or with roommates. I want him to have support. I want him to be close to our metro service. I want him to be able to be out in the community and try to find friends. These are all wishes and dreams that I have. And another section, what are Jackson's wishes and dreams? One day he wants to have a girlfriend. One day he wants to be able to ask a girl on a date and go to a movie. These are all things that our family can help him try to establish. There's other pieces that we need to consider when we're going into our financial plan. What about day programs? Right now, Jackson's sitting on a wait list in our state. There's not great funding for waiver services with Medicaid, and so he'll probably stay on that wait list for a long time because of the conservative nature of our state. So any day program, anything that is filling in the gaps for Lexi when he's not working at McDonald's, I would have to fund out of pocket. What about residency? Right now, housing in Utah is quite expensive. And so in order just to buy a townhome, it's $400,000. How am I going to fund that townhome for Jackson? What about medical care? We won't be here anymore. So Jackson won't be on our employer's policy. So how is Lexi going to tap into Medicaid and SSI to cover his medical piece? What about ongoing therapies, maybe social skills therapy? Again, tapping into higher education. Jackson could qualify for a training program with vocational rehabilitation. He could qualify for it's something called Aggies Elevated. Utah State University is a university here in Utah, and Jackson could connect with Aggies Elevated. It's a university program and a college experience for him that is for people with disabilities. But Lexi wouldn't know any of that unless I map that out for her. Now, what is the biggest expense that we have to consider for our loved ones? It's housing. So here are those rates in Salt Lake City. The average month for a monthly rent for a one-bedroom apartment is about $1,500. And you're thinking, well, gosh, Jenny, that's really high. Why don't you just go find an apartment for, 500, 700? I probably could do that, but it would be in a very rural setting, which is great, and there's benefits to that. But for Jackson, he doesn't drive. The way that Salt Lake is set up is it's along the Wasatch Front. It's along our mountain range. And the metro system only runs north to south. There's very limited transportation east and west, let alone connecting to a rural community once the train drops you off. And Lyfts, like there's Lyft and Uber, right? We all want this to advance. We all want self-driving cars for our kids with Tesla. We all want all of these things, but we're not there yet. So what can I do today? I have to have Jackson on the bus system, on the metro. What can I do to fund that for Jackson in the areas where the services are available for him? What about my needs? About 4 years ago, I think 3 or 4 years ago, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. He is in tech. He's the main provider. He provides for our family, and it's a great opportunity. I've always worked, but it's always been, he's kind of supporting our family. Well, what would happen if his cancer was to the point where he would no longer be able to be the main source of income for us? What would we do? In order to go into an assisted living home, it's usually about, anywhere from a couple of $1,000s a month, maybe around $6,000 a month to $100,000 per year, depending on where you are and your coverage. It's just a lot to think about. But because he's been ill most of our 30 years of marriage with one thing or another, arthritis and joints and surgeries and all of these different things, it's always been something in the back of my mind. How am I going to provide for my family if something happens to him? It's also retirement. Like someday I want to retire. My parents just passed away during COVID, and we lost both of them. They didn't really have a lot of life insurance in place. They lived with my sister, and we ended up funding most of their funerals, and we did it on just the bare minimum, right? Just to bury someone these days is between $9,000 and $12,000, and that's just unless you do a cremation. It's a lot to consider, so we need to think about my burial, my parents' burial, if they don't have resources, and then also, again, like I said, what about retirement pieces? And what if, something happens where my husband needed skilled nursing facility, or what about home health? And our policy only covers so much of that. There's pieces that we're going to have to figure out. Also, quality of life. We love to travel. We love to go to the beach every year. Do we still want to build that in for Jackson? What about what quality of life do we want to ensure? Right now, he has his money that he gets from McDonald's. It's spent on McDonald's. It's spent on movies. It's Slurpees. It's going to our gas station to get a fountain drink every day. It's whatever he wants, right, in his life. And so what else do we need to secure for him to build life beyond his McDonald's money? Because although I'm very grateful that he works 3 or 4 days a week at McDonald's, is it a living wage? It's not. So what else can we supplement to make sure that Jackson has the life he needs? The third step, we need to create a plan. And there's a lot of pieces to it. You're like, oh my gosh, where do I even start? Or maybe you're thinking, okay, Jenny, I've got this. We already have all these things in place. So let's go through it and cover some of this to see if there's any holes for you. On the left side are the public sources of funding, because you think my daughter's just going to care for him and he's going to get Medicaid and SSI and that'll be great. Well, we already showed you with housing that Medicaid and SSI is not going to cover it. Jackson might only get $1,200 a month from SSI. Well, his apartment rent will be about $1,500. So we already know there's going to be a deficit there. We also need to make sure that his basic needs are covered. Well, if everything's going to housing, how will his basic needs be covered? On the right side are the private sources of funding. So things like an ABLE account, that might be a new term for you. We'll talk about that. We can fund Jackson through a supplemental needs trust, which is also a special needs trust, a third-party supplemental needs trust. Family support. So what family members can we tap into for things like transportation or running errands, maybe taking him grocery shopping? Also, those gifts that maybe grandparents leave or aunts and uncles leave. How are we going to pay for professional fees like his counseling or his medication? Things like vacations and computers. His superpower with autism is politics. So he has to have a phone so he can monitor what's happening with the Republican and Democratic Party. He has to have a computer so that he can be online in his chat forums. He has to have a gaming system so he can decompress after McDonald's. Otherwise, the whole house is walking on eggshells. There's these pieces that sound like luxury items, but for him, that's part of his routine. That's part of his mental health. So those are things that we've established are part of his life. What about the Social Security benefits? Is there going to be a survivor benefit available to him? Is he going to be able to qualify on his own? What about haircuts? What about shampoo, shaving cream, razors, new Star Wars t-shirts? How are we going to fund all of those things for him? So there's not a one answer for every person. It's going to be more of this piece of a pie. You're going to have your private assets, whether you own a home and there'll be the sale of the home to help fund your special needs trust. Maybe you're putting away things in your 401k. Maybe there'll be residual left over from your retirement after you pass. Then you'll have your public benefits piece. Let's make sure we're maximizing that. Are you charging your loved one room and board to make sure that you are maximizing your Social Security benefits? If you think, we just are always paying for things, or we don't really want to tap into that. Well, if we don't, then it means this, it means this negative consequence. If we're not charging room and board, then they're not going to be able to get as much through Social Security, because they look at your situation and think, well, Jackson doesn't need it, so we're not going to give it to you. But if I charge him room and board and then I'm able to use that money to help care for him or to put that aside for him, then that's an asset for Jackson that's not going against his name. Those natural supports, the neighbors, the siblings, the community supports. And then, of course, insurance is huge. We think, okay, we have it through our employer. What happens when you retire and you no longer have that? And now you have arthritis and high blood pressure and cancer, like my husband, and it'll be harder for us to tap into those private insurance pieces. It's still possible, but it's better to do it as soon as possible. So let's look at that for you and see what we need to put in place. This is the biggest question we get from families, and I even think about that myself. We were just looking at our retirement accounts this week, and we were thinking, how much is enough? Inflation keeps going up. What will Jackson's needs be? What will our health look like then? These are all questions. How much is enough? So let's go through it. Now, I don't want this to be a scary thing. This is just a typical situation. We're going to go through different options of what would fund this family. And what we do with Caring Tide is we break it down. We work with single moms. We work with grandparents who are caregivers. We work with siblings who are the caregivers. We work with a family that's two parents or partners that are the caregivers. So this is just one situation that we'll break down for you. So how much is enough? This assumes a 6% annual compound return on assets, 3% annual inflation, and Marty receives $1,300 a month from SSDI when his dad is 67. So, and here's one thing on SSDI. There's SSA for Social Security Survivor Benefits, SSI for Social Security, and then SSDI. And sometimes when people apply for SSI, they get a rejection letter and they think, oh my gosh, I didn't qualify. What happens is they go in and check for work credits, and they always look for SSDI first. So Marty's dad retired, and so they're going to pull from those work credits first. The same thing with Jackson. They're going to pull from his work credits first, and he'll get SSDI first before SSI. And then you'll get your letter that you're approved or denied for SSI after they check for the SSDI. Now, if you are denied for SSI the first time, appeal it. A lot of people are denied that very first time. So don't be afraid of that. We can help you with that too. Okay, so let's go through it. Marty's 17 today. His parents are 54 and 53. They want him to have about $4,000 per month to live on his own from age 25 to the end of his life. Remember, that housing piece is going to take a big chunk of that. It will take about $3 million from when dad dies at 85 to support Marty from his age 48 to his age 85 to get Marty through his life. So that's a lot of funding when we as parents ourselves are trying to just get our own funding built. So how can we do it? Well, you can invest a lump sum today of $620,000, earning an assumed net of 6% every year. Or you can allocate via estate planning. Any assets remaining at the time of your death will go to your child's special needs trust. You can utilize life insurance, and there's a variety of options, and we can walk you through all of the different options, and we have services that will fit every situation. You can open an ABLE account for your loved one who qualifies. It's a special kind of savings account that we'll talk about. Think of out-of-the-box strategies. We're not advocating credit cards or debit cards, but I know with my credit union, we have a way to round up. So every time I make a purchase, I go to our grocery store, I can round up and put that in a dedicated savings account. You can save what you can each month. You can use a credit card reward system. I know when I go to Costco at the end of the year, I'll get a check, and I can use that check from Costco to use for my groceries, and the money I put from groceries can go into a dedicated savings account. And did you know if you can save even $20 each week for 1 year, you will save over $1,000? That can be leveraged to buy life insurance with a larger death benefit over the years. Now, these are all, of course, hypothetical examples, and we would look at your situation closely. So let's break it down even farther. What about if you have a 2-income stream home? So Bob and Susan are both 35 and have 3 children. One of their children, Shane, has disabilities and needs a lifetime of support. Shane is also 10 years old. Together, they earn $150,000 annually. So what could Bob and Susan do? Make sure that Shane is eligible for SSI and Medicaid at age 18. Again, your loved one might be eligible earlier. It just depends upon your income level. But at 18, they're their own person, right? And so it's a totally different ballgame. And so wait until about 1 month after they turn 18 and then start applying. because sometimes they look when Social Security goes back and does their review, if you like apply right on the day, sometimes they might, count something when he was younger towards you, and then you wouldn't qualify. So wait at least a month before you go to apply for SSI. Have a will. Let's see, purchase term life insurance on both parents through your employers. That's a really inexpensive thing you can do. Have a will and revocable trust drafted with a supplemental needs trust for Shane. And then make sure all beneficiary designations are coordinated with the estate plan and trust. So again, any assets, like if we left our house, right now our house is in a trust, and our assets are split between our 4 kids, and then Jackson's piece is in a special needs trust for him so that it's protected. Our retirement accounts, our beneficiary is the trust, so that we can have the money go in there safely. Purchase permanent survivorship or second to die insurance on both parents that will pay to the trust upon the second parent's death. So we're assuming Ryan, my husband, is going to pass away first because of his health challenges. And so then after I pass away, then it's triggered to go into the trust. This is what else Bob and Susan could do. They could purchase the survivorship whole life policy on both parents' lives, pay only after the second parent dies, which we just talked about. The special needs trust can be the beneficiary, have permanent life insurance. So we had that term life insurance. We were out of college. We didn't make a lot of money. We had this little family, and we thought, okay, well, we need to be responsible, right? So we bought this term life policy. Ryan gets diagnosed with cancer, and isn't this horrible? But the very first thing I thought of once we processed the cancer diagnosis is, oh no, what about our life insurance? Is that still in effect, or did that run out? Because I knew it was term, and I knew we'd had it for a lot of years, and I wasn't sure if it was still in effect. And so that was a concern for us. There's benefits to both, and based on your situation, we can help you identify the options. But that is the downside to a term life policy, is it does run out. And we also want to realize that mortality comes for everyone, right? The hardcore truth is that we all have an expiration date on our mortality. We have 3 choices on how we can handle that reality. We can deny it, we can ignore it, or we can plan for it. And you think, oh my gosh, I'm in my 50s, I'm in my 60s, it's too late. We're just going to hope for the best. It's never too late. We can help you no matter if you have a 3-year-old and you're just starting early intervention, or whether you have, I deal with moms who are 80 years old and they say, I can no longer lift my 60-year-old son out of the bathtub, or the paratransit is coming and I cannot physically push his wheelchair over the threshold of our door. How can I get him out to the curb? Because the paratransit won't come up to the door to get him. So no matter what stage of life you're in, there's resources that we can find for you and that we can help you. So what is the last step? We need to help you put your house in order. So meet with one of Caring Tide's disability specialists. We'll analyze where you are now, what's already in place, and how we can make your services work for you moving forward. We have our certified financial planners, and they help you assess all of your needs. Okay, what is the matching with your employer 401k? Okay, 3%. Does it make a lot of sense to raise that to 6%, or would it make more sense to put that additional funding into a service that you could tap into for retirement? There's so many creative options that we could go through with you, and everybody's situation will different. Let's look at your cash flow. Let's look at your expenses. Let's look at what the other needs are. Jackson is not our only child. Maybe we have a desire to help fund the other kids' college education. So we need to make sure we're setting things aside for other children too, not just Jackson. We'll look at all of those different pieces. The last piece that I like to do is to meet with your estate planner. So once we have the finances established, once we know what's going into the trust, then we can meet with the estate planner and start that process. What needs to be done? Do you already have a will? Well, great, you have that, but it might go to your state's probate and tax laws depending upon your situation. So it's safer to have things in a trust, and that way you can always have that special needs trust set up for your loved one that needs it. What about guardianship? Are you like Jackson, where you have a child with a foot in both worlds? He is in the neurotypical world, but he also needs all of this support. So maybe a limited guardianship is better for you rather than a full guardianship. Maybe your state has a legal option for supported decision making. Maybe all you need is power of attorney. There are things about power of attorneys, though, that you need to be aware of, that it is revocable. A power of attorney, your loved one has to have the mental capacity to understand it so that it's not challenged. It can also be changed at any time. So let's say I only had financial power of attorney for Jackson, and somebody at McDonald's was his best buddy and decided that they knew the system and they wanted to get power of attorney for Jackson. If he signed that, that could make it legal for them to have power of attorney for Jackson. So you need to make sure the mental capacity or the cognitive level is there for him to understand contracts, for him to understand, talking about healthcare needs with a provider. What is the level of support that's needed? And that's going to be different for everyone. What about tax benefits as we look into ABLE accounts? Does it make sense for you to open an ABLE account in your state, or would it be better to open an account in the state of Virginia? There's 48 different ABLE accounts, and so you'll want to look at your state's benefits, the rates that they charge you to have the ABLE account. In Utah, it's only $6.75 a quarter, and so it's very economical. Other states have higher rates, so you'd want to look at that. I also have a tax benefit in Utah if I go with Utah's ABLE account. So throughout this planning process, we take you through this 9-step process, and we won't go through all of this today, but we want to look at things like your family mission statement. What's important to your family? For our family, advocacy is important, that everybody has their rights intact, that everyone has the life that they want for themselves, that no one's controlling them. These are all of the pieces that our family values, that we want to be good humans, we want to be kind. What is my letter of intent? What is the blueprint for Lexi? What is it going to look like for Lexi to take care of Jackson? Lexi needs to know what resources Ryan and I have. We need to know what we've set aside as far as, 401ks, retirement plans, stock from Ryan's company. What are all of these different pieces that are in place for Lexi? What will happen after Jackson's 18, which he is right now? He's 23. What happens after that? What can he tap into? As a family, have we done all of that? What about building the legal foundation? We have our special needs trust in place. Our home is in our trust. We have some basic things identified, but what will change? I have a grandbaby now. Do we need to add a piece for her? What about living arrangements? We have some little piece of property up in Idaho next to grandpa's. Who do we want that to go to? What are our desires for that? If we put that in a trust, is there money there to fund paying the taxes and the water bill on that little piece of property? There's, all these different factors, and your situation will be different than mine. What about implementation and the family meeting? Have we had those discussions? Does Lexi want to be the caregiver? Would my youngest daughter, Isabella, be a better option? Does she have more of the emotional, connection with Jackson that would be a better fit? Is she going to live locally? What about my son, Colin? What will be his situation? Is he an option? We need to have those discussions and let people be honest. We can't just assume and put that on people. We have an option with our credit union to have an executor who's part of the credit union be the executor of our trust so that it's not put upon one person in our family and they can still have autonomy in their life. So there's a lot of options that we can look at. Some people don't have any other, maybe it's their only child. Maybe there's not any other family members around. I'm working with one mom right now, and that's her situation. So it's some hard conversations of who is going to care for that loved one once she goes. And then, of course, an annual review. When we set that trust up when Ryan was sick, a lot of things in our life have changed. And so it's something that you'll want to review annually just in case. So with Caring Tide, with our disability planning specialist, we'll go over your special needs trust. What's your healthcare situation? What does your healthcare look like? What do you anticipate happening? What about the healthcare of your loved one? Are you expecting them to have longevity? Is it something where we need to just plan for probably the next 10 or 15 years? Or do you expect them, to live into their 80s or 90s? What does your planning situation look like? Education. Do you want to continue your education for your loved one, education for your other children? Employment. We all want to be able to retire someday. Maybe some of us will keep working in some capacity, but we need to figure out how to leverage those funds so that we're in a position where we're not stressed as, an 80-year-old mom caring for my son in my basement. And what am I going to do if I die tomorrow? And I'm so fearful about that. Let's take that fear away and let's put a plan in place so that you can have peace of mind and your family members can have peace of mind. Housing and again, income planning and maximizing benefits like an ABLE account. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with ABLE accounts, but it's just a dedicated savings account. Jackson can access that money through what's called a stable card. It's just like a debit card, but it protects that money so it doesn't go against his Medicaid and his Social Security. The only thing you have to be aware of with ABLE accounts is there is that Medicaid payback. So if Jackson were to pass away, Medicaid would go in and reclaim the money that Medicaid put towards his life. So that's why you want to balance the money that you put in an ABLE account with a special needs trust. So you put a lot of the assets into the special needs trust, but we still have money in the ABLE account to pay for things like haircuts, a new mattress, t-shirts, all of those things that go into Jackson's life. But you need to be aware of all of that. And our team can help you feel your way through all of that as you make the choices best for your family. So let's review the steps. Step 1, let's meet you where you are, understand where you are. Step 2, let's perform that audit. Let's see what your financial situation is. And you don't need to be embarrassed. Everybody has a unique situation. People have lost spouses, people have been divorced, people have lost jobs. Other people have a ton of assets. So let's just meet you where you are. We'll figure it out and let's find the next step forward for you. Let's create that plan. Let's put it in place. Who's going to be the guardian? What insurance do we need? And let's get your house in order and really go through that 9-step plan for you and create that safety net for your loved one. So what is this going to cost? That's what you're thinking. What is the cost of Caring Tide? This is so important for us that we want this available to everyone. An average professional service planner would charge you around $2,000 to do this checkup for you, to make sure you're maximizing your resources. About another $1,000 to meet with the attorney, to go through your will and your estate plan and to perform that audit. Then you have a financial planner. Just to write a financial plan could be at least $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 to write that financial plan for you. So with Caring Tide, we think all 3 pieces of this plan are so important. You can't do one without the other. If you do the estate plan, but you don't have any money to fund the estate, well, that's great. You have a trust, but there's no money in the trust. So how can we figure out how to fund your trust? What assets can we tap into so that you can fund your trust? What about disability resources? Do you realize that there's waivers in your state, SSI, Medicaid? Have you tapped into community resources and parent resources? We have this national directory that's just going to scratch the surface for you that we're going to give you today for staying on this call. But as your disability specialist, I'm going to dig deeper. You live in Wisconsin? Great. Let's dig into it. Let's figure out what transportation options are available. Let's figure out what community supports and social supports are available for your loved one. This is my cutie Jackson with a Star Wars t-shirt. These are things that I have to figure out, but I need to answer this question. If you went through this process with us, is it worth it? If we help you maximize the benefits your family is getting from the government, would it be worth it to you? If we introduced you to new resources in your community to help you overcome challenges, would it be worth it to you? If we gave you a financial plan for your future and a total blueprint, would it be worth it to you? If we help you establish a special needs trust for your loved one, would it be worth it to you? If we gave you peace of mind, knowing that you would have a plan in place, would it be worth it to you? So I want you, we'll send this recording to you so that you'll have it as a reference. You'll be able to watch it for the next 24 hours. But this is a QR code. You can take a shot of that with your phone and it will take you to that link, the consultation link. And we can also put that in the chat if you want to add that, Brady, to the chat.
Yeah, one thing that I think would be super important that Jenny had touched on that I just really want to reemphasize. We've been in this space for a very long time, and our mission is to give every family in our country the opportunity to get this planning and to get that done. We recognize that there's costs that are associated with that, as Jenny had shared, with financial planners and with estate planners and resource maximization, all those things that happen there. What we do at Caring Tide is we'll package all of this. We'll bring this to you, and we don't charge you to do that. Okay, that's a really important thing that I wanted to share here is that if you meet with us, with our consultate or our disability specialist, Jenny being a perfect example, we will guide you and direct you. Now, are you going to need to meet with a financial planner? You probably will. Are you going to meet with, going to have to meet with an attorney? You probably will. And there are costs associated with that. But we've vetted the planners, we've vetted the attorneys. We have the best in the country, in my opinion. And it's a great opportunity for you to be able to be guided along this process by an individual like Jenny.
Thanks, Brady. And the other piece to that, I worked with one mom just this morning, and she had that exact same question. What will this cost me? Well, there's different services available to you. So based upon your needs and the services presented to you by our team, you get to pick. You get to decide what is appropriate for you. So we want you to be aware that we're totally transparent through the process. We're not pushing one thing on you or another thing. It's based upon where you are today. We meet you where you are. We evaluate what you need, and we say, here are these options. Do you want to be really aggressive? Are you 60 years old? Do you need to be aggressive? You only have so many years of earning potential. Or do you want to, be really conservative? So here's another path for you. And you get to choose the services that are the best fit for your family. So there is that consultation link for you. It's just a 30-minute free consultation. We'll talk through where you are, how we think that we could help you. And, we'll be transparent too. We'll say, oh, you already have this, this, and this set up. Here's this additional resource for you. Thank you so much. Please reach out if you need anything again. Or maybe we see all of these different areas where we might be able to be of service for you. And then you get to pick and choose what works for you. So this is the National Resource Directory. We've gone through and established all of these connections for every single state. Whether you live in Florida or Alabama, we have some resources for you. And then beyond what this directory provides, as your disability specialist, if you work with us, I'll even go deeper than this and find intricate resources for you that would work for your area. I want to spend some time on questions. I'm sure you must have questions, so you can put those in the chat, or if there are questions in the chat, we can go over those. Or if you want to unmute, we can do that too. And we'll stay around till a little bit right after 12 and answer those questions for you. And I'll put this back up so that you have it, those links available.
The other thing is we'll email you that link for the resource directory.
Mm-hmm.
They'll
Yeah.
also email a link to schedule a consultation. It's very simple to be able to do, and it's at your convenience based on your calendar. So that's something that we'll have sent out to you today as well. We'll also include a recording of today's webinar if you wanted to go back and review any of the material that we had covered.
And also you'll see there you can follow us on social media. We're always posting resources on Facebook or on our new Instagram account. So follow us. We're also connecting you with our partners on our Instagram account so that you can see other good things happening in the community. Sometimes our world is so heavy, and so we try to share the positive parts of our disability community. So follow us there too for uplifting messages and also resources, kind of the nuts and bolts of this world. So any questions in the chat, Brady?
No questions. Are there any questions from our guests today that you wanted to ask before we let you have some time back in your day? Very good. Thank you all for being a part of our presentation today. Thank you, Jenny, for the material that you had shared. We will be in touch as we shared via email. And as always, please feel free to reach out if we can ever be a resource.
Thank you so much. We will be in touch with those tools.
Thank you.